Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I'm Ryan Maddox, 35, a mechanical engineer in Denver. Saturday morning, late winter, a thin bar of light cutting across our kitchen island. I had the kettle on, a podcast murmuring low, and a grocery list half scribbled on a sticky note. Nothing dramatic. Quiet enough that the refrigerator sounded loud. That's when I saw it. Her journal, open and face down like a bird that had hit the glass. Not hidden, just left there on the counter where I rest my coffee every morning. I didn't go looking for anything. I never have. But the book was splayed to a page titled in her neat block letters. Goals 2025. Most of it looked like the kind of list people write in January. Read 12 books, train for a half marathon, take a photography class, go somewhere coastal. Half the lines had little stars next to them. Her way of pretending asterisks create momentum. I skimmed without touching, the way you look into a neighbor's backyard by accident and then pretend you didn't. And then the first line hit my eyes and stayed there like a glare off chrome. No more him. My name wasn't on the page. The sentence had a blade in it. Thin, exact, designed to slip between ribs without making a mess. For a second I mistook the knot in my chest for anger, then realized it was something else. Vacuum. Like someone had opened a hatch and the pressure dropped. The kettle clicked off. I didn't move. Engineers are trained to separate signal from noise. You look at the data, not the story you want to tell about it. I noted the date on the page, last Tuesday. The ink color, same pen she'd left beside the book. The coffee ring dampening the margin, lapping at the bottom of the M in him. She hadn't written it months ago in a fit and forgotten. It was fresh. I slid my phone from my pocket and took a single photo. No zoom, just proof that my gut hadn't invented a sentence. I left the journal exactly as I found it, turned the kettle back on as if the first click had been a false alarm, and poured water over grounds with the patience of a man building a bridge out of routine. The podcast host made a joke I didn't hear. My pen hovered over the grocery list and wrote, oranges 3 times in a row. I crossed out 2 of them and laughed quietly, surprised I had a laugh left. She came down humming, hair in a loose braid, sweatshirt half-tucked like the Instagram women she followed. She kissed my cheek, which used to be a small thing I waited for, and now felt like performed kindness. I said, morning, because mornings deserve the courtesy. She glanced at the journal, didn't reach for it, poured herself coffee like nothing about the world had shifted 30 inches to the left. What's the plan today? She asked, already checking her phone. I told her I'd hit the hardware store for sandpaper and out of habit added, "Want to come?" She flicked a smile and said she had Pilates at 9 and maybe brunch with the girls. The girls are always the girls, when the specifics would make the math easier. When the door closed behind her, I looked again at the counter. The journal stayed open, a mouth still forming the same sentence. I slid a coaster under it so the paper wouldn't keep drinking the coffee ring. That felt generous in a way I couldn't explain. I wiped the island, stacked yesterday's mail into clean piles with the precision that gets me paid, then went to the garage and stood there among the quiet of solvents and cold metal. I found the orbital sander I'd been meaning to fix and took it apart on the workbench, lined the torque screws like soldiers, labeled the motor housing with a piece of blue tape. Hands moving is a good way to keep your face still. Something had broken in me, but it wasn't a dramatic snap. More like a fatigue crack you only see when you know where to look. I traced it back, the canceled dinners, the new passwords, the way she had begun narrating our life like a trial run for a different one. Small things, each one survivable in isolation. Together, a pattern. I didn't feel betrayed. What I felt was replaced. On paper, with a period at the end. At my desk, I opened a blank note and typed a list titled Quiet Tasks. Not reactions, just sanity checks. Back up the tax documents to a private folder. Move the title to the Subaru from the glove box to the safe. Update emergency contact at work from spouse to brother, and sit with how little that change hurt. None of it was war. It was housekeeping for a house that might be losing a wall. I didn't do all of it. I just wanted to see the words. Knowing I could act later was like finding the fire extinguisher without pulling the pin. Her text came late morning. How's your day? The kind of message that bounces off the surface to see if the water's still warm. I answered like always, 2 sentences and a small joke about the Sanders brushes. She responded with a selfie from a sunlit table, 2 mimosas, for elbows in frame, captioned refuel. I typed enjoy and felt the strange relief of not asking who else was there. Around noon, I walked back to the kitchen and turned the journal right side up to read the rest. Below, no more him, she'd written, say yes more, new headshots, boundaries? That question mark hanging off the end like a shrug. There were no specifics under my line, just the declaration. I wanted to believe I'd misread it, that it referred to junk food or doom scrolling or a work habit. But I've built enough machines to recognize when a label matches the part. When you write, no more him, you're not talking about sugar. I closed the book gently and slid it a few inches to the left, the way you adjust a picture frame that's always been crooked. The room looked the same. Somewhere between the kettle clicking and the braid on her shoulder, the center shifted. I made a sandwich I didn't taste and ate it by the window, the street salted white, a neighbor pulling his kid on a sled. It's a decent neighborhood. People wave. We've been here for years. I scanned the houses and tried to imagine which one would suit a man touching his keys in his pocket while he says, yeah, I'm good, and means it. I took another photo, this time of the kitchen as it was, light stripe across the counter, mug, her book. Then I put my phone away and washed the plate. I dried it. I put it back in the same slot. The ordinary rhythm steadied the room, or maybe just me. By late afternoon she was back, bags on her wrist, hair escaped from the braid, cheeks flushed with cold and compliments. She told me the studio was adding a new class and that the new instructor was actually amazing, the way you audition a word to see how it sounds in your mouth. I nodded like I was listening from the other side of glass. She asked if I could help bring in the water from the car, and I did, because I am still the kind of man who carries weight when it's put in his hands. That night we watched a show we both used to care about. She scrolled through her phone while pretending not to. I laughed at a line that deserved it, and she looked at me, surprised to find the old man still sitting in my spot. When she went to brush her teeth, I stood in the doorway and looked at us in the mirror. 2 people and a fluorescent light. I took one breath, held it, let it go. The kind of breath divers take before they drop. I didn't confront her. I just slid my wallet from the nightstand and moved my spare key from the communal bowl to my office drawer. A small change, hardly worth noting. But as I clicked off the lamp, I understood something simple and sharp. She would regret leaving that journal open. And whether or not she ever admitted it out loud, the year had already started keeping score. The week after the journal felt like Denver in February, bright sky, hard ice. She called it a busy stretch, a phrase that works on people who don't live in the same house. Monday started with a wardrobe I hadn't seen in a while, a fitted blazer, heels that make a hallway sound like a metronome, perfume I only catch on anniversaries. She said there was a networking breakfast. I said, have a good one, and tasted metal under my tongue. When you're an engineer, you learn that vibration shows up before failure. You hear it if you stop talking. Her phone lived face down, volume off. At dinner, she suggested we eat at the counter, which meant she could scroll while pretending to chew. I set 2 plates at the table anyway. She brought hers to the counter. I took a bite of roasted chicken and said, calm like a man reading a manual, what's going on with us? She didn't look up. Nothing. You're making something out of nothing. She added a laugh the way people add a garnish. I nodded. Silence has a way of telling you which parts are decorations. Tuesday evening, she came home late and soft with a kind of glow that isn't cardio. She tossed her toad on the chair and started a fight about the thermostat like it owed her money. You always set it too low, she said, though the number hadn't changed in 3 winters. I said, we can raise it 2 degrees. She squinted like I'd ruined the script by not being defensive. The argument evaporated mid-sentence. She took a long shower and left damp footprints that crossed the bedroom and my patience. I wrote, thermostat complaint, in a note labeled drift, then deleted it. On Wednesday, she said, I'm grabbing drinks with the girls after Pilates, and left an address that had nothing to do with reformers. When I asked which girls, she waved a hand as if the names were private property. I loaded the dishwasher the way I always do, silverware heads up, plates by size, bowls like stacked moons. At 10:40, my phone lit with an alert from the door sensor I installed last summer. At 12:13, I heard the lock click, then the hush of someone removing heels in the dark. She slipped into bed without brushing my shoulder. I stared at the ceiling and tested the range of my voice by whispering exactly nothing. Thursday, her jokes aimed for bones. She called my meticulous tool wall cute. She asked if I ever got bored fixing other people's problems for a living. I said, sometimes, and let her words sit between us like an unwatered plant. When your partner starts mocking the part of you that pays the mortgage, it's not about the wall. It's about erasing the man who built it. I went for a run in the cold and came back with a calm heart rate and a new line on my quiet tasks list. Stop explaining. Friday at lunch, she texted a photo of an ahi bowl with 4 hands in frame, none of them mine, captioned fuel. I responded with a thumbs up and an appointment reminder I'd set days ago for a furnace tune-up. After work, she had a thing downtown, which is how people talk when they want plausible deniability. She stood in the doorway and asked, "Do you mind?" The question sounded like she was giving me a chance to be controlling so she could feel justified. "No," I said, and meant it. If someone wants distance, they'll find it whether you block the driveway or not. Saturday afternoon, I was under the Subaru rotating tires while she tried on jackets because the girls are planning a ski weekend. She leaned in the garage doorway smelling like new leather and said, "Do you ever think maybe we're stuck?" I rolled out on the creeper and looked up at her without wiping the grease off my hands. "Do you?" I asked. She blinked, like I was supposed to fill the silence with a confession or a fix. "I just want to feel alive," she said, practicing a line she must have heard somewhere. "What does that mean, specifically?" I asked. "Specific kills the spell." "You're interrogating me," she said, and went back inside. I tightened the lug nuts in a star pattern and double-checked the torque. People love the idea of spontaneity until the wheels come off. Sunday we had brunch with friends who ask kind questions and mean them. She did that thing where she answers for both of us. Our life turned into a panel discussion where I'm the silent expert. When someone asked about summer plans, she said, "We're keeping it flexible," and glanced at me like we had an inside joke. On the drive home, I watched her scroll in the passenger seat, her thumb a metronome. I said, "Is there someone else?" The car stayed straight. My voice stayed level. She laughed in a register I didn't recognize and said, "You're paranoid." Then she added, "This is what I mean about control." That word again. I nodded and let the accusation float out the cracked window with the cold air. The pressure built in smaller rooms too. She started narrating my moods to me. "You're quiet, which means you're mad," she'd say. I'd answer, "No, I'm quiet because I'm listening." She'd push, "To what?" I'd say, "To see if there's anything to hear." I stopped offering weekend plans first. I stopped sending midday check-ins. I stopped volunteering fixes to problems that arrived already solved with someone else's advice. My silence was a boundary you could see but not climb. Midweek, a coworker pinged her during dinner. The name was saved as initials I'd never seen before. She angled the screen away, then set it face down as if gravity were a morality clause. "Just work," she said, without me asking. I cut my steak and said, "Okay." Non-reaction is a mirror. People either see themselves or the room around them. She chose the room and accused me of being distant. "You used to care," she said. "I do," I answered. "That's why I'm being careful." The conversation stopped there because the version of me who would chase her words had already left the table. I noticed the little tells, new gym bag, different playlist, the way she started locking the bathroom door. She wore a new lipstick that didn't survive dinner because dinner wasn't the point. She talked about a client offsite, as if it were a pilgrimage. I added small things to my list without executing them. Gather serial numbers for the electronics, photograph the contents of the garage, export the shared calendar. We still had small good moments. Coffee on the porch when the sun fought through the cold, a shared laugh at a stupid ad, her head on my shoulder during a movie she didn't finish watching. They landed like snow on warm pavement. Pretty for 10 seconds, gone by the time you reach for your phone. I let them melt and prove the temperature. One night, she came home with an unfamiliar confidence, the kind you borrow from someone else's attention. She studied me like she was checking if the sculpture had moved. "You're different," she said. I took a breath and told the truth in a single line. "I'm done debating what I can see." She waited for me to name the evidence. Secrets starve in silence. Arguments feed them. When she finally tested the line directly, "Maybe we need space," I nodded like a man reading a weather report and said, "Take what you need." She frowned, confused by permission. Control requires a tug on both ends of the rope. I had opened my hand. She left that night in the same blazer she wore on Monday. The house hummed. I washed a single glass and dried it and placed it where it belongs. Then I sat with my list and added the last item for the week. Stop mistaking noise for signal. She had her goals. Now I had mine. Resolve arrived on a Wednesday with an alert I didn't expect. Our anniversary reminder pinged the shared iPad on the kitchen shelf. The banner covered her lock screen long enough to show a dining reservation I hadn't made. 2 seats, downtown, her name. My thumb hovered over the glass, not to snoop, just to confirm the math. The restaurant was the one we used to save for promotions and birthdays. 18 months since the last time. I set the iPad back in its cradle and felt a steadiness come over me, the kind that shows up when a calculation closes to zero. I didn't wait up that night. I pulled 2 suitcases from the hall closet and a stack of flattened boxes from the garage. I've moved labs between buildings in a single weekend. A living room is not complicated. I packed my books first, then tools, then clothes on hangers laid flat like sleeping ribs. I left anything that would make a mess if she needed to feel dramatic later. I labeled each box in block letters with a Sharpie and lined them along the wall like a neat goodbye. At midnight, I drove to a storage facility off I-25, one-eyed toward months ago just in case, when small cracks were beginning to show. The manager remembered me because I'd asked about fire suppression and camera redundancy. I rolled the door on Unit 143 and slid in my first load under the hum of sodium lights. It felt less like escape and more like housekeeping. Half a life in quiet rows. Room to move around what stayed. Back home, I left my wedding ring in the ceramic tray by the front door where I keep my wallet and keys. Not thrown, just set down with the same care I give to parts I'm done installing. I took a photo of the tray. I took a second photo of the counter. Journal open, coffee light, that single sentence eyeing me from the page. No more him. Then I slept in the guest room and let the master bedroom keep whatever ghosts it wanted. Morning work was administrative. There's a dignity to clean lines in a bad situation. I called my bank and removed an authorized user from my credit card, the one I pay in full every month. I reduced the joint checking balance to an amount that covered utilities for a quarter and moved the rest into an account in my name only, leaving a paper trail any judge would nod at. I rerouted my paycheck to the private account I'd opened when the first girls' weekends started multiplying into work-off sites. I logged into streaming services and shopping sites and changed passwords I had been the only one to remember anyway. I made a list at my desk and ticked boxes. Cancel shared auto-refill orders except the ones for basics. Update beneficiaries. Export photos to a hard drive and place it in my office safe. Each click felt like tightening bolts to spec. If her goal was no more him, then the responsible thing was to remove the parts of me she'd normalized as ambient support. Let the experiment run without the variable. By 9, I had a call with a lawyer recommended by a coworker who has 3 kids and a permanent calm. We didn't talk about war. He said I sounded composed. I said I was busy. He laughed once and suggested I keep doing exactly that. When her text came, "Happy anniversary. Let's do something this weekend instead." I stared at the line and imagined the second screen where a reservation reminder still sat like a lit cigarette. I typed back one sentence. I adjusted plans already. Public exposure happened at 10. Not a thread. Just the photo of her goals page, cropped to the words and the date in the corner, posted quietly to the audience that knows us in real life. Family, real friends. Caption, resolution completed. No tags or names. Facts travel efficiently without adjectives. Phones buzzed. Mine stayed silent on purpose. I put it face down and went to the garage. The shelf where her camping gear sat like a hobby someone else had suggested stayed untouched. I tightened a loose bracket on the workbench and wiped the vice jaws with an oily rag. I heard the house once, not with my ears, but with whatever sense tells a man when a room has shifted. It felt lighter. Or maybe I did. By noon, my sister called 3 times and texted once. "Are you okay?" I replied, "Yes." She wrote back, "She's calling me." I answered, "Let her." A college friend sent a single question mark, then a screenshot of the post, and the words, "That her handwriting?" I tapped a thumbs up. An old neighbor wrote, "Proud of your calm." I put the phone back down and opened the storage unit app to reserve a larger space for the weekend. Practicalities keep the blood cool. She arrived home early, keys grabbing at the lock like they were angry with the door. "What is that post?" she asked from the entryway, voice higher than the room could hold. I was seated at the dining table, laptop open to a spreadsheet titled Household Budget. post-separation. I didn't close the screen. A line you wrote, I said. Her eyes went to the counter, to the book, to the tray with my ring. I watched the sequence land. No denial, just scrambling for a new angle. You're humiliating me, she said. I didn't mention you, I answered. You recognized yourself. She cried the way people cry to soften the mirror. I handed her a box of tissues without commentary. She asked if we could start fresh today, as if a sentence on paper weren't a starting pistol already fired. I told her the grocery list was on the fridge and that the joint account still covered the basics through June. She asked where my things went. Out of your way, I said, which was true in the point. That afternoon, I drafted a short message to both sets of parents. We're taking space. Please give us room to handle the logistics. We're safe. My mother called immediately. I let it go to voicemail and texted back, call tonight. I'm still a son. I just refuse to be a narrator for someone else's play. At 3, I met a locksmith I'd scheduled at noon. He rekeyed my office and the garage side door only. The front door stayed as it was. I handed him cash and a tip that made him nod. He said, good luck, man, like a blessing. I said thanks and meant it more than I expected. Before dinner, I took one more load to storage. On the way back, I stopped at a park where kids were failing and succeeding at the same time on a small hill of late snow. I sat long enough to feel the air get thin and then warmer, the way Denver does when the sun remembers us. I checked my phone once. The post had a handful of comments that didn't need replies and 2 messages from numbers not in my contacts. I deleted both without opening. When I walked through my front door, she was seated on the bottom stair with that deliberately casual posture people use when they've been rehearsing a line. We can fix this, she said softly, trying on a tone. I set my keys in the tray next to the ring and answered in the same voice I use when tightening a final bolt. I did my fixing. She searched my face for heat and found a clean surface instead. That unsettled her more than anger ever could. By evening, the house had a new map. My side of the closet was a simple emptiness. The guest room smelled faintly of cardboard and cedar. My office clicked open with a new key. In the kitchen, the journal stayed where she'd left it, heavy with its single honest sentence. I didn't touch it. Public truth had already done the only work I intended. Removed me from the role she wanted to cast, and replaced me with silence she couldn't edit. By night, calls were going to her. Because I presented a fact and went quiet. Calm creates gravity. People feel the pull. I slept the sleep of a man who has finally stopped negotiating with his own eyesight. Tomorrow would bring the part where consequences arrive wearing her perfume and someone else's cologne. Tonight, I let the house settle around a simple equation. She wrote the goal. I honored it. Consequences move quietly at first, like water finding seams. Then they arrive in clusters. The morning after the post, my phone stayed in Do Not Disturb, while hers apparently did not. I could hear the ripple through the walls, short calls, longer calls, a voicemail that began with the word, why, and never found a period. I made coffee, changed the furnace filter, and emailed my lawyer a clean inventory list. Calm is a system you run when the room wants you to improvise. By noon, her closest friend texted me a paragraph about private matters and public shaming. I responded with 6 words, her words. Her date. No names attached. 10 minutes later, the same friend sent a shorter message I didn't expect. I told her to apologize. I set the phone down face first and went back to tightening the vise on my bench. An apology might be a sound, but I was listening for actions. The family round began after lunch. My mother called to pray into the air, and I let her, because mothers need to do something. My father asked the kind of questions men ask when they've already decided to respect your decisions. Then her father called and asked if I could stop by his office. He's a practical man, a contractor who still keeps a tape measure on his belt when he comes to dinner. I sat across from his drafting table while he stared at a set of plans for a building that wasn't mine to care about. I saw the picture, he said. Is there anything I'm not seeing? I said, there's less than people think. He nodded, exhaled, and told me he wouldn't be co-signing any leases for her boutique this spring. Not until she learns to say a thing and live with the echo, he said. The social weather changed fast. People don't like ambiguity when the caption is clean. The girls who used to fuel her late nights with big talk and bigger tabs started sliding into my messages like they were approaching a skittish animal. We didn't know it was that bad. We thought you were being distant first. I'm sorry for my part. I didn't reply to any of them. Work noticed next. A woman I didn't know messaged me from a burner account and said, "Thank you for posting." He told me she was single. The account disappeared an hour later, but the message did its work. The fantasy had a seam, and even the seam had a seam. That night, she came home required silent. The way people get when they've just learned their co-conspirator has other calendars to check. She stormed my office the following afternoon, pushing the door open with the kind of force that asks witnesses to appear. Two of my team were at their desks, headphones off, eyes on their screens, pretending not to hear. She held up her phone like a warrant. "Take that down," she said. I looked her in the face and answered with the sentence that ended the conversation before it began. "You wrote it down." The mask slipped. Not a tear, just a flat second where the performance lost its audience. She recovered quickly and tried on a new script. "We can handle this privately," she whispered, glancing at my guys. I said, "We are," and pointed at the door. Public truth followed by private removal. When a man stops chasing, the air gets weird. The texts came in waves. Anger first, then confusion, then sweetness with a timer on it. She sent photos from early years like coupons for a feeling. She asked to talk like adults, which meant, make it easy for me to feel moral again. I wrote one reply that covered everything. "Email me logistics, lease, utilities, move-out timing. I'll respond within 24 hours. Boundaries that fit in a subject line make good fences." She tried seduction the next night, which I almost respected for its honesty. She appeared in a dress I know by the way other people look at it. Hair down, voice down, hands soft. I opened the door 2 inches. She leaned into the gap with a smell that reminded me of better rooms and said, "Can I come in?" I said, "We're not doing that." She kept her eyes on mine and said, "We're still married." I said, "That's why?" She blinked, recalibrated, and left a tremor at the edge of her smile. It was almost enough to make me forget the sentence on a page. Almost. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt quiet as a prayer. The public pivot arrived on day 2. Her account posted a gray square apology about miscommunication and mental health that never used the word sorry. The comments didn't buy it. A cousin wrote, "Own it." A coworker wrote, "We're rooting for both of you," which is how people back away without looking like they're backing away. By the 3rd night, exposure had tightened into isolation. The girls weren't answering her calls. The coworker changed his photo to one with a woman and a dog and turned off comments. Her father stopped returning her texts after a long one she'd sent at 2 a.m. She tried one last angle that used to work on me. Logistics as panic. "Rent is due. Can we talk?" We already had. I forwarded the spreadsheet I drafted on day 1 with line items and deadlines. She replied with a paragraph about memories. I replied with a line about movers. Then came the waiting. It started with footsteps in the hall and a soft knock, then 3 sharper ones. I didn't move. 10 minutes later, "Please." I poured tea, carried it to the desk, and answered one email about a torque spec that had been missing from a vendor's print for 6 months. First night she yelled. I learned I can hear desperate through 2 inches of solid core and still care more about the steepness of my chamfer. Second night she cried. That one tried to steal my sleep, so I put in earplugs and read a manual for a tool I don't own yet. Third night she said nothing. That was the hardest. Silence recognizes silence and wants to be kind to it. My phone lit with a message from her mother around midnight. "She's outside. Can you at least check on her?" I stood at the peephole and saw her sitting on the hallway carpet with her back against the opposite wall, suitcase upright beside her like a chaperone. She looked small in a way she had avoided looking for months. The part of me that carries weight when asked tightened its grip and then loosened it. I texted her mother. "She's safe. We'll speak by email at 1 p.m. tomorrow." I turned off the hall light from inside my unit and let the dark finish its sentence. People began to see her clearly because I stopped softening the edges. Our friends recalculated. Her father canceled the contractor he'd booked to help her refit a storefront. The studio shuffled her off the weekend schedule to give you space, which in that world means, we can't afford your mess on our brand. The man with the initials vanished completely from her timeline, replaced by sunrise quotes that land, as well as a paper airplane in a storm. I kept moving forward. Another trip to storage. A call with the locksmith to key one more interior door. A short email to HR about changing my emergency contact. I started cooking simple meals and ate them at the table, because tables tell you whether a home is being lived in. When people asked for updates, I answered with progress markers, not feelings. The feelings were there. Of course they were, but they didn't get to drive. On the fourth night, she didn't knock. She just sat outside my door, back to the wall, feet flat, palms up in her lap, like she'd finally understood what she had asked for and how much it weighed. I brushed my teeth, set the timer on the thermostat, and lay down in the guest room with the same calm I use when a machine is humming its spec after a long repair. There's an ache to it. There's also relief. She had written the goal. I had honored it out loud. And now the echo was doing what echoes do, returning to the mouth that made it. Morning came with quiet and a line of light under my door. I showered, shaved, and made coffee like I was heading to a job site. Routine is a scaffold. You climb it when the ground shifts. Her suitcase shadow still cut across the hallway carpet. She hadn't left. I answered 2 work emails, forwarded the signed retainer back to my lawyer, and scheduled movers for Saturday in a voice that sounded like I was ordering bolts. Then I opened a blank message to her titled, Next Steps, attached the budget, the timeline, the list of items she'd keep without argument, and the spreadsheet with utilities split through the end of the month. I didn't open the door right away. People confuse urgency with importance. I've built enough machines to know they're not the same. At 10, I set my mug in the ceramic tray beside the ring I'd left there and unlocked the deadbolt. She stood up too fast, wiping at her cheeks like she'd been sprinting in place. I kept the threshold between us, one shoulder against the frame, the way you stand when you're not inviting or blocking. You won, she said, which told me she still thought this was a contest. I shook my head once. No, I said. We finished. Her eyes searched my face for heat. I let her find none. I made a mistake, she said. The words were shaped like accountability, but carried no weight. I didn't correct her. I pointed to the email subject line visible on her lock screen. Logistics at 1, I said. Everything we need to settle this is in there. She tried the old doors, memory first. Do you remember our first place? She asked, like a coupon for a feeling might still be valid. I do, I said. That's why I won't keep paying for this one with the parts of me you decided were optional. She flinched, not at the words, but at the quiet. Anger would have given her a counter-argument. Silence is non-negotiable. Then came the pivot I'd expected since day 2, the reveal she thought would reset the board. He blocked me, she said, chin up like she was confessing charity work. The initials I'd seen in her notifications suddenly had a door slammed on them. It should have hurt. It only confirmed the geometry. She hadn't been fighting for me, just for the scaffolding that made her side adventures feel less like falling. I'm sorry, she added, softer now, as if understanding that sorry isn't a solvent, but sometimes it's a start. I nodded once, to acknowledge. I stepped into the hall, closed my door behind me, and set my suitcase upright. She reached for the handle like she could anchor me with 4 fingers. I let her hand find air. You wrote it, I said. I level, calm as a torque wrench. No more him. Wish fulfilled. For a second her face cracked in a way that had nothing to do with performance. It was the look of someone realizing the sentence they wrote had become a contract with their own echo. I can change, she said. Maybe, I answered. But not here. Not with me. The line was a boundary placed where the truth had been all week. Respect doesn't return because you invite it. It returns when it finds no discount. I lifted the suitcase. She followed me down the stairs in short steps, asking small, practical questions. Where are you staying? Will you text when you get there? Can we meet with a counselor Wednesday? And I kept my answers short. A month to month. No. Email only. On the landing, our neighbor nodded to both of us with the grim politeness people use around ambulances. I held the lobby door open and let her pass first. Courtesy survives even when romance doesn't. Outside, the air had that Denver trick of being cold and bright at the same time. I loaded the bag into the trunk, closed it gently, and rested my palms on the lid long enough to feel the metal give back its stored sun. My phone buzzed with a new email from her father. A single line. Paperwork for the boutique is off. I'll help with movers Tuesday. No gloating. Just a man setting a beam on center. I replied, thank you, and meant it. Another buzz. My sister sending an address for a spare key drop and a photo of a plant she insisted my new place would need. People build small bridges while you cross big ones. I drove to the storage facility first, because endings should loop through the places where you did the work. Unit 143 swallowed the rest of the boxes like it had been designed for this exact quantity of leaving. I took a slow inventory with the clipboard they keep near the office, because the act of writing steadies a hand that's just set something down. Then I headed to the month-to-month loft my coworker had tipped me off to: concrete floors, a view of a rail yard, a kitchen that looked like honesty. I signed the short lease, took the keys, and stood in the blank living room until the silence registered as relief. At 2, her email came through, a more honest list than I'd expected: dates, items, forwarding address, acknowledgement of the accounts already split. I replied with confirmations and one line at the end: "We'll keep counsel between lawyers from here." She sent back a single word: "Understood." Sometimes respect returns as compliance before it grows into anything warmer. I don't need the growth. I need the line to hold. Friends texted through the afternoon. I answered a few. I ignored the ones that wanted a story instead of a status. The post kept collecting restrained comments. I didn't add to them. The ring sat in a tray 3 miles away, and I let it. Symbols belong where they last told the truth. Evening came with a light wind pushing grit across the parking lot below my window. I assembled the small table I'd bought on the way over and placed my laptop on it, then set the plant my sister had insisted on in the corner. I changed my emergency contact in another portal: brother, not spouse, and felt the rightness of a field accurately filled. I cooked eggs and toast in a pan that felt comically large in an empty kitchen and ate at the table like a man who understands furniture isn't decoration. It's commitment to a room. Her final message of the day arrived at 9. "Thank you for not making this uglier," she wrote. I stared at the line and saw the woman I'd met years ago flicker behind it. A person capable of kindness when it wasn't competing with a performance. I typed nothing back. Gratitude is a fine place to leave a door closed. Somewhere between washing the plate and setting it in a new cabinet, I realized I hadn't checked the post in hours. The world can carry its own gossip. I'm not a participant anymore. I texted my mother that I was safe and that the plant had already been watered. She sent a heart and a prayer hands emoji like she was 50 years younger. I smiled, locked both deadbolts, and stood a full minute in the dark to listen to a space become mine. Respect isn't a vow you wring out of someone. It's the ground you decide you'll only stand on. She set a goal that morning at our kitchen island. I fulfilled it that week without shouting, pleading, or collecting witnesses. Now the echo belongs to her, and the quiet belongs to me. If she reaches out down the line, there will be lawyers, not lunches. If I hear she moved away, I'll wish her steadiness and feel nothing else. Tonight, I'm exactly where I should be, a man in a small, honest room, done bargaining with his eyesight, ready to build whatever comes next on a floor that doesn't shift when someone opens a door.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.